Welcome to the second channel, guys. In this one, we're gonna do some diagnosing and hopefully some fixing. We're over at my mom's house, and we're gonna try to figure out why this valve is leaking on the hot water heater. So, spoiler alert, this is not a vehicle repair video, but you know, I think this should be kind of interesting. So she called me about a week ago and said, hey, this valve's leaking on the water heater. I called the company since this is newer, and they sent me a new one under warranty. I said, all right, sure, I'll come over. And you see she has a bucket here that was kind of catching the water. I shut the water off right here. Conveniently has valves placed and drained off the bottom, and then put the new valve in. Well, lo and behold, a week later, or a few days later, she said, hey, the valve's still leaking. So I said, all right, we must have an issue. Now, the purpose of this valve is it's supposed to open up at 210 degrees to prevent the water from inside boiling and causing a catastrophe of explosion, the tank exploding inside. Or it's also set to 150 psi to open up at. And then you're actually supposed to cycle these valves once a year annually, as it says right on here. And all you do to do that is just pop it open like that. It's a spring-loaded valve in there, and I think they want you to do that so that way it doesn't like get corroded shut. So clearly it's a brand new valve and it's working properly. My next step was, I said, well, hey, let's turn down the hot water heater. I had her turn it down, and that didn't fix the issue either. So I came over today, and we're gonna check the water pressure in the house. Got this gauge we're gonna thread onto the spigot, turn the water on, and whoo, we've got just over 80 psi. That's quite a bit. And after a quick Google search, most houses should be anywhere from 40 to 60 psi. 80 is definitely considered high pressure, but that shouldn't be opening this valve and causing it to leak and trickle into the bucket. I mean, this is set to open at 150. Now, I asked my mom when this started leaking. I'm not over here all the time, and she said it was right after they just replaced the pipes out front. So she said they dug up the street and they replaced the water lines out front of the house. And here's my theory of what's happening. There probably was no check valve at the street, or the check valve that was there that prevents water from flowing back from the pipes in the house back into the water system, potentially causing contamination. That valve was probably not there, or it was leaking, and when they put a new one in, now this house is on a closed system. So you got 80 psi in here, and the check valve at the street, and I'm thinking when somebody takes a shower, and then this is filled with cold water, still at 80 psi, and then they shut the shower off, I'm thinking that the water gets heated up, and then it creates high water pressure. So my sister's about to take a shower right now, and we'll see if that water pressure increases at all after she's done. While she's showering, the water pressure's holding at 75 psi. And now she just turned the shower off. See, I just ran out here, it's already up to 90 psi. I'm gonna wait for a minute. I see it's still creeping. We'll see how high that goes. In fact, I don't even really have to wait, because we have the red dial that will hold how high it goes. And now we're over at the valve too. I did take the bucket away, so we got dry floor. We'll see if anything comes on out of here. Still climbing on the dial up to 110 psi. This is what the expansion tank is going to solve. Obviously the system does need a regulator too to keep it down to 60, but if there was an expansion tank, it would hold at 80, maybe go up a touch. But right now the water inside the hot water tank, the cold water that's entered, is now being reheated. Oh, see, it just jumped again, and it's expanding, and it has nowhere to go since there's a new check valve at the street. You look at this brand new tarmac, and you can see somebody was in here recently. Well, actually, okay, that's the natural gas, and then this is the water. So that's got the Penta 5-point. See if we can't, because we might need to shut this water off, actually. There's a look at the shutoff. Well, I'm gonna need a tool for that. I do have one at home. Back over here at the water pressure, look at that. We are up to 145 psi. Holy smokes. And would you look at that? The valve is working. So it's hot water. Actually, that's only lukewarm. But this pop-off pressure is 150 psi, so it's starting to trickle. I'm gonna go ahead and relieve the pressure now. You gotta love the wallpaper in this bathroom. Remember always looking at this as I was a kid, and it's cool to see she still has it. But let's listen to that. It doesn't matter if it's the hot or cold side, it's all connected. So let's listen to that 150 psi. Yep, you could hear it was higher in the beginning, and then it slowed down a little bit. And back outside, you see that dropped it to 90, but still climbing because the hot water heater's probably but look, we indicated 145 on that red dial. So easy way to fix this temporarily would be just leaving your faucet a trickle, and that, because you don't want that 150 psi. Well, A, you don't want the valve leaking on your hot water heater, and you don't want that kind of pressure on your copper lines in the wall. God forbid one of those blows out. It's not going to be a good day. I'm going to run to Home Depot and get two things: an expansion tank, which will essentially add an air bladder to the closed loop system. That way, when this water heater heats up water, it's not going to increase the pressure in the system, because air in the bladder can be compressed and water can't. So when you have little air bubbles inside this water heater and it heats up, there's always air and water, and that has nowhere else to go in the pipes. Essentially, it's going to cause high pressure, and it's really bad for a plumbing system because it's constantly low 80 psi, 100 psi, 80 psi, 100 psi, and it can wear out the walls of the copper pipes. And again, I'm no plumber, so this is just based off the stuff that I know and have read. So that expansion tank should take care of the issue, but I'm also going to see if they have a water pressure regulator so we can dial that back down to maybe like 50 or 60 psi, because 80 is pretty high. I just checked. All right, back from Home Depot, and we're now in the crawl space. So what I've got is a 2-gallon thermal expansion tank. It should be good for up to 50-gallon hot water tanks. I have a regulator that's good to adjust from 25 to 75 psi. And then putting a new ball valve in, because I remember when I was younger doing some repairs on this house, this valve doesn't work or seal off the system, and this valve doesn't seal the system. It works, but it still runs by. So we'll put a new valve in for it. Got some other stuff. I want to avoid soldering if at all possible, because it's right against the wood here, and I mean, we'll solder if we have to, but it's funny. We used to play video games down in here when we were kids. My brother had like a little TV set up, and we'd play Dr. Mario right here and hang out. And I was just looking, I found sitting up in there a photographic science book by my brother. And the first page is, look at that, he has a picture of me with my long hair that I used to have. So funny. Old records. This is his old trash can. Ooh, which has a mouse in there. So the first step is going to be shutting the water off at the street. I'll go do that now, and then I'll get to this, let you know how it works out. Just a 1/4 turn valve in there. Go ahead and relieve the pressure. And shut this valve off so when we cut the pipe, all the water in the house doesn't come flying down. Now I can open this valve. Hey Mom, can you go turn your faucet on in the bathroom, both hot and cold? So she's opening those valves upstairs now. We got great flow. We're gonna empty all the water out of the whole house. Wow, there's some heavy pitting in these pipes. Oh, like no pitting in this one. I bet you it has all that pitting right here just because the water's coming around that bend, causing turbulence in there. Slap her on up. I don't have a good pipe deburrer, or whatever it's called, but this works good. I didn't have the right adapter to go from 3/4 inch NPT to 1/2 inch, so I got to use one extra piece here, but that's no big deal. You got a little fire blanket set up. There it goes. Now you never want to splash water or cool these down real quick. You let them cool to room temperature on their own, or on this large piece I could put a little bit of water just to speed things up, but don't put it on there. Otherwise, it could cause little cracks in the solder that, you know, probably wouldn't harm anything immediately, but in the long run, you might end up with issues. Of course, I didn't clock the T right. I meant to have it sticking off this way so I could thread the tank on and leave the tank on an angle. I should be able to clock that a little bit more. Yeah. From what I read, these expansion tanks can go on any angle. And I know it's not super attractive on an angle like that, but there just wasn't a ton of room over near the hot water heater, and this can really go anywhere in the system. So right here, I actually got some strapping in case we wanted to secure it, but that's plenty strong on there. Now I can turn this valve on, fire up the water at the street, and turn this valve on. Now we can go, we'll purge all the water through the system, go shut the valves upstairs. Once you purge all the air out of the system, you can shut the water off. Do this at the, well, multiple faucets, but at the furthest faucet is the most important. Next, you want to inspect all your threaded connections, solder joints, make sure nothing is leaking. And now, I guess let's check what this is factory preset at. Come out to the spigot to check the water pressure. No air in there. And moment of truth. All right, there we go. We are at 45 psi. I think I will leave that right there. No adjustment needed. Now, if you did want to adjust it, you come in here, loosen this lock nut, and then spin your flathead. I guess I'd probably counterclockwise, I'd imagine, or I'm not sure. Either which way, spin it to adjust that pressure, and you'll notice this is tilted down because when I rechecked all my joints, I did have a very slight drip getting wet out of this one. So luckily, I was able to loosen this guy and then spin this down. I turned the water off again, spun that down, and no more leaks. And for anybody wondering why I used all the thread-on connections instead of, say, a sweat-on ball valve, not only is it easier, but it's better for in the future when, say, my brother wants to come in here, sister come in and have to replace a ball valve. It's gonna be a lot easier for anybody to do that. Like this one, you know, this has to be cut out and replaced at some point. You see that somebody went a little overkill with the solder when they did that joint. If it's dripping out the bottom, that's too much solder. And we're gonna call this job fixed and done. I don't need to do any further testing because I know for a fact that this air bladder in the system, you know, we had that one-way gate valve, check valve at the street that doesn't allow pressure to push back in. And so now when the hot water heater, it has cold water in it and it heats up and there's expansion that takes place in these pipes, this air bladder is going to be able to expand out and soak that up instead of building up the pressure in the water lines. Now for this tank to work properly, you do have to put air in the air bladder, which this says it's factory pre-charged at 40 psi, so I'll just use a tire gauge, whatever, but you want to, whatever your water pressure set at, you want to fill this air bladder up to that pressure, and that way, like one side's the air bladder and the other side, well, I think the air bladder's in the whole thing, but anyway, it should have pressure in it, and that's how it works properly. I know we were jumping around a bunch, and there was a ton of talking in this video, but hopefully you learned something, and I'm going to call this a successful diagnosis with repair. And at the end of this video, I did want to show the hot water heater install I did at our house probably about 5-6 years ago. And you know, this didn't have an expansion tank when I took the old heater out. I only replaced it just because of age, really. There was no other reason. But this is how I did it here, and you know, I added a valve in case you ever have to replace it. It's nice and easy. Just shut that, screw it off. And this same one, actually, 2 gallons. And then we have a pressure gauge that I installed here too. So it's showing 64 right now. Let's open it up. It goes up to 65. And on the hot water side, I had the idea of throwing, so I put a ball valve in here, and then I was like, oh, I'll filter the hot water heater, but this, and then put a gauge in here too, and sweated those all together. What a waste of time, because I realized the first time I went to go use my hot water heater that it takes a lot longer for the hot water to get upstairs. So that was just a complete waste of time. I got this nice stainless steel filter housing too, and a filter in there, because I saw the kind of crud that is inside of these old hot water heaters. And where the water comes into our house, with the water meter here, you can see there is a built-in check valve. Most houses will have these. However, when they get older, this probably, even if we didn't have an expansion tank, this would probably still allow flow back to the street because they get old and worn out and they just don't seal with the corrosion on the plate in there. There's like a little flapper plate that only is supposed to allow flow in one direction. Anyway, the official end of my rant is that I think the township should have told the homeowners in my mom's neighborhood, hey, we're putting check valves in, so if you don't have an expansion tank, you should have one, because that really could have led to a flooding disaster in the house if one of those pipes burst or the tank, burst. So anyway, that's should probably maybe write a letter to the township and let them know that, hey, you should let these homeowners know. Anyway, that's the end of the video. That's the end of the long rant and the talking about expansion tanks and regulators and check valves. And yeah, over out. I'll see you next time.